Hello and welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech and tech conversations into one place. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor for Escape Collective, and joining me today...
Josh Weinberg, Tech and Culture Editor with Escape Collective.
I'm Zach Edwards from Boulder Gruppetto.
Hello all, how you doing?
Yeah, doing well.
Good. Anything interesting in the stand this week, Zach, or is it still spoilt for choice?
Yeah, spoiled for choice, but a bunch of triathlon bikes, so that's fun in its own way.
Okay. No mysterious yellow puddles coming out of bottom brackets, I hope?
No, definitely not.
Okay, all right.
The last couple are both new builds, so fresh.
Okay, fresh. Okay, good. Okay. Well, on that delightful note, let's kick into the episode. Plenty to talk about this week. I mean, we're still coming off the back of Sea Otter, and I guess catching up on some of the things that were at least discussed there. Josh, you've been really busy diving deep into a very big, literally speaking, a big topic, which is 32-inch wheels, and we're going to chat a bit about that. There's some interesting tires that were shown at Sea Otter that sort of went a little bit under the radar. Going to have a little bit of a different segment this week where I've got a wish for the industry, a product I would like to see. And then, we've got the usual tech coverage. We just had the Bespoked show out of Manchester in the UK, where our tech writer Suvi Loppinen was there. And so we're going to talk about some of the interesting little bits and pieces that we're seeing there. Hunt have some new wheels. And of course, we will wrap up with a Ask a Wrench segment with both Josh and Zach on this week, where we answer member questions, and you have to be a member in order to listen to that segment. But I'll explain all that once we get to it. All right, well let's kick off. Let's talk about these big wheels that are starting to roll. Josh, what's the background here? Like, what sort of led to us writing about these wheels?
A colleague, if you will, friend, was at the Taipei Cycle Show, which is what got me kind of thinking more about these. When he was at the Taipei Cycle Show, it was Daniel Yang he works with Newhouse in San Francisco area, making custom bikes, and now they're doing production bikes as well, mostly metal hardtails and gravel bikes. He also does design work for his own brand, and he's been going to the Taipei Cycle Show for the past few years to just kind of connect with the industry over there. Spotted this Maxxis Aspen 32-inch by 2.4 cross-country tire that got us talking about like why Maxxis, like why a big brand like Maxxis might be making a tubeless performance tire for this wheel size. And the wheel size has traditionally been used in the unicycle market along with some other kind of larger wheel sizes, but the tires have not been that great for like off-road use. But that hasn't really held back some custom frame builders from using those wheels and tires in their builds for larger statured riders that don't really,
such as Leonard Zinn.
Yeah, Leonard Zinn and David Boch, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, from Dirty Sixer. They are the two kind of reigning brands right now, building like bikes around 32 and 36-inch wheels for folks that are like 6'4" and taller, for a variety of reasons that we go into in the article, and we can talk about here if you want to as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably worth noting there is a full feature on this, a full explainer with a lot of input from key industry people that is now live on Escape. And Josh, I know you've been spending the last few weeks putting that together. Yeah, you and I had both been on a call with Trek regarding this topic, because I was aware that Trek had been testing this wheel size for at least 5 years with like their test team, like with Travis Brown out of Colorado, ex-Olympian. So I think that was a really interesting conversation that you and I both had with them, and pretty enlightening. Like they were keeping some cards very close to their chest about whether they are actually going to bring this to market or not, but they certainly are pretty far along the testing side. And what was interesting is they sort of admitted that Maxxis tire that was seen at Taipei was what allowed them to like confirm their testing. It's the first time that they've been able to like actually now do back to back where they have equal tires to use in like a 29er platform and maybe even a 650B 27.5 inch platform, and sort of do direct comparisons between these bikes and figure out where the benefits are and where the limitations are. So I think it's worth noting that like a tire manufacturer just doesn't whip up a tire. Like there's some pretty significant costs involved in having the molds, especially when it's such a large size that I believe required Maxxis to get like new drums to make. Like they had to invest in new manufacturing tooling for this. So I think there's certainly some investment here, and it's sort of, that would typically only come with a promise of purchase at some point. So I think it's safe to say at this point, like while very few are confirmed as much, I think 32-inch wheels are going to become a thing. What remains to be seen is whether it will succeed. Before I want to talk about that, like what would it take to succeed? But before we do, I think just very quickly, I'll just, kind of cover the idea here, which is like 27.5 to 29-inch wheels. There was roughly a 10% step up. I think it's closer to 11% in terms of external dimensions. And then 29 to 32 inches is a similar percentage. It's like another 10% up. I think closer to 9%, I think, is where your numbers ended up on that one, Josh.
Right.
But it's worth noting. And then just to add a little bit of confusion, we previously covered like this wheel size that like WTB and Moots and a few others had been playing with, a 750D. And that kind of fits in between these two. So it's more like a 5% improvement or increase over that, like over that 29-inch wheel size. So if history has anything to go by, like Travis Brown said this, that like, historically speaking in mountain bikes, we've made this 10% jump very successfully going from 27.5 to 29-inch. And he said, and basically, if you imagine 32 inches being that another 10%, you sort of have all the same positive gains and benefits, and also like the potential barriers to overcome all over again. He sort of said it all sort of translates in a very linear fashion. So anyway, let's talk about something that I guess wasn't covered in super detail in the article, which is like, what do we think is going to be needed to make these a success? Like, say they come to the market, what's the use case, and what's what will make it succeed, what will make it fail?
I think just like, and maybe this is covered a little bit in the article, but I think at least at first, taking a more like rider size centric approach to designing bikes around this wheel size would be an interesting way to roll it out. I think there's a lot of like seeming, at least to me, and maybe Trek can figure this out better than I can, but a lot of design roadblocks to designing, to making these bikes fit for smaller folks, anywhere from like bottom bracket drop to, like where handlebars are positioned in relation to saddle height, all these types of things that really impact how a bike rides for someone, are limited by these bigger wheels.
Yeah, I mean, when 29ers first came to mountain bikes, a lot of the conversation was around like, it's a wheel size for bigger riders, and smaller riders benefit from a smaller wheel. And, like Trek, for example, did this. Like the extra small, medium bikes would be 27.5-inch wheels, and then everything up that from there would, medium and up would be 29er. Right. And there was a little bit of crossover. And I think, your article covers this, where like, the likes of Zin believe that this is going to be a height dependent wheel size, that like the benefits really only exist for taller riders, where you can overcome some of the geometry compromises. Trek wouldn't confirm as much, but they said they're basically testing it and only believe it will succeed in the market if it can be had for almost all rider sizes. So I think it's interesting, and
it's a tough value proposition for a big brand like that, Trek, or any of the other large brands to have kind of a niche offering at this point in time. Understandably, they're doing a lot of testing to figure out if they can make it work, and then if so, then how do they do it? Rather than, I think, like the introduction of 29-inch wheels to the mass market was a little bit more haphazard. Even though folks had been testing and riding those for a while, they maybe didn't have the degree of like testing protocols that Trek is using for this project, and probably other wheel sizes that we don't even know about.
So for now, Trek, I believe, are testing it in a cross-country application. We asked about gravel, and Travis Brown's response was like, "Well, we're the mountain bike test group, but the curly bar group really should be paying attention to this." Was sort of his hint at thinking that the benefits would equally apply over to drop bars. But yeah, big wheels. Zach, I mean, I know Josh and Zach, you've both been around long enough to remember like the introduction of 29ers into the mountain bike space. Zach, do you remember the amount of hatred that 29ers first got?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hatred for sure, but I think like people gradually got over that, and I don't know, like how I feel about this is maybe how people felt about 29ers when they first came about.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this makes less sense than 29ers.
Why is that?
I think that there are some very tangible benefits. And I think that in certain scenarios, for certain size people, on certain like riding situations, like there are a lot of benefits. But maybe this is me being a bit negative, but like mountain bikes right now are also really, really, really good. And like adding internal frame storage and hiding some brake hoses isn't really enough of something to sell that many more bikes. And that's kind of where the mountain bike world is right now. It's like, we've got the Geo and like everything pretty dialed. Like 5 years ago, the Geo was a lot different. And we've all kind of settled on like, okay, this works. So I feel like if we all of a sudden throw a new wheel size into this, like obviously we're going to take things that we've learned from what works on 29, but I feel like we're going to be starting that, figuring the Geo that actually works out again, right? So like if I were to buy one of these bikes, I would not buy one from at least probably the first or second product cycle, because like there's going to be quirks, things aren't going to be quite right. And I think too, there's also, from like me being a mechanic standpoint, there's also a lot of things that we've seen with both like 29ers, with road and gravel all going disc, is like we're going to come out with a new wheel size, and then 2 years later XY company is going to be like, this bigger wheel is great, but now the wheel's not as strong, so we need a new axle standard. So then we have to have a whole new line of bikes that have a new axle standard. And then the group set manufacturers are going to be like, hold up, we widened the rear end of these bikes, so now we need to make wider cranks and wider bottom brackets. And then with that, we also need to come up with new group sets. And it's just like this, I don't know. It takes a while for these things to all kind of settle on. And I'm also not sure like who these bikes are being built for. Is this like the average person? Is this only for tall people? Is it World Cup racers? Like, what's the end goal here, I guess?
I think it's all of the above, but I think, if it doesn't prove to be a faster product for World Cup races, then I think it probably won't come to market, at least from Trek's point of view. And I think that's what they're testing.
But like for a World Cup, if it's faster, that's great. But like you also see almost every World Cup guy, even that's not short, like taller people, are still having to do these extreme stem positions to get their like fit how it's supposed to be. So now you're going to raise the front end even more, and people aren't going to be able to get their positions, or we all go back to 100 mil forks so that the front ends are lower.
Yeah, it's possible.
So like, is a bigger wheel and less travel better than a 29er and more travel? Like because then the stanchions are also longer, so then they're going to be flexier, so you have to go up in diameter. Front end's heavier.
Like there's all these bikes are going to get heavier for sure. Yeah, no doubt this will make bikes heavier, as 29ers did make bikes heavier. And no doubt we're going to have, if this does come to fruition, we're going to have years of adaptation and improvement. The whole product cycle restarts again. So
yeah, it's not like we just come out with a bike and it's great.
No, but I think your mention of axle widths is something I brought up, and so Chris Stores from engineer at Trek basically said something like, well, 32-inch wheels are going to make everything that you currently have redundant anyway, so like there's no reason not to do a new axle standard in that sense. He's like, it's not like you can put your existing wheels or fork or whatever or frame, it's not like you can use them anyway, so like a new axle standard wouldn't be a deal breaker. And I think it's worth keeping in mind Trek has had a very long-standing relationship with SRAM. They've, over the years, introduced a lot of standards together. I think they together introduced Boost, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some changes come out at the beginning.
That's also the problem, is like, right, Trek's going to have their idea of what they're going to have super duper boost. And then
Yep.
pivot is going to be like, no, we've got super duper extra boost plus. Like there's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's not just, the bike industry doesn't work in the way of like, okay, we're all moving to this wheel size and this is our axle standard. Like that just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So
who knows? Maybe they'll decide that Super Boost is the right size, and that Pivot gets its way, and they go, "Aha! I told you so." And then Pivot has to pivot back to Super Boost. But anyway, it's I think it's a really fun topic. I think as Zach said, it's not something I'm coming into it with a lot of skepticism, and I think the size will have to really prove itself in efficiency. No doubt a bigger wheel will have the benefit of greater rollover, but that will also come with other negatives, like, potentially weaker wheels, weight, all these other things. So one to watch. But yeah, Zach.
The like better rollover thing is interesting to me too. I was thinking about this last night while I was riding on my gravel bike on a new bit of single track here in town, which is a great little bit of a connector. But anyways, it's mountain biking, right? Like it's supposed to be technical to a degree, but in like every new trail, at least that I've ridden in the US in the last 5 years, is like all pretty much machine built, like bench cut, kind of a bike path with like man-made rock features every so often. So like, do we need more rollover for that kind of trail? Where it's just like smooth.
Well, I mean, your point is, I remember early days of 29er, people would call them cheater wheels, and they'll say this is dumbing down mountain biking. This is, like you're cheating your way across the trail. And I think we're probably in for a time where people say the exact same thing all over again.
I guess to me is like, maybe it's just where I ride here is like trails are either very machine built and smooth where you could ride it on a road bike, or they're like old school hand built trails where like sometimes a 29er feels too big because they're like tight and twisty and technical. So like to me, having the more rollover doesn't quite make sense to me. But that could just be the type of trails that we ride.
It's kind of like this. It fits, to me. It fits into this trend where, like, Fox is coming out with the 34 SL, like 130 mil cross country fork now, right? Like, so we're going to see 130 mil forks on cross country bikes. So if you think about like the pro scenario, the bikes are getting bigger, they're getting more capable, the courses are getting harder, and harder and rockier and steeper, and so the bikes have to like be, the idea is that the bikes have to be bigger and more adept at handling those courses, right? So it's like everything is getting bigger and beefier in the cross country space because they're making courses harder. I don't know, I mean it just seems like that's the way like things are kind of going.
Yeah, I mean, right, like an XC bike now is more capable than an enduro bike from like 2 or 3 product cycles ago.
Right.
Yep. And the trails, like an XC World Cup course, is basically as hard as a professional enduro race from 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago.
I think a bit, but I don't know that I buy that argument, because like the races are still won on the climbs. The technical bits are rough and rocky, but they're made to look extreme on television. Like it's all man-made stuff. So like if you take the line that was designed, like it's not that challenging. Like, but it looks crazy on television. It's like a rock line that's all pieced together, so it's relatively smooth, and then you go off a drop that like,
I don't know. There's definitely high consequences in some of these.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there's not high consequences. Like if you get bucked off line and like, or someone chops you and you end up on the wrong line, yes, it's very bad. But like the line isn't that hard from what it seems. Like I've not ridden a World Cup course, but I've watched progression of World Cup courses over many years. And like, that's kind of what it looks like, is like man-made features that if you carry the speed on them and like take the designed line, then it's not that challenging, but it looks intimidating.
Yeah. I'd argue I've stood at the top of some lines on a few World Cup courses where you look on TV and they're just, the pros like Nino are just smashing through it without blinking. And there's 1 or 2 lines where you're like, I'm like, I wouldn't feel comfortable riding that on my next e-bike. I would want a long travel enduro bike before I'd commit to that line. And yeah, that just keeps progressing up and up. Like some of these lines are very, very steep, and these riders are all being trained by skills coaches, and often downhill pros they're getting trained by them, and you still see these riders top end riders having some pretty bad crashes from time to time. So I think that the level's just that high that they make these courses look easy. But I think there are lines in just about every course now that like you'd probably be faster if the rollover was more significant. Anyway, I think probably spoken about this topic enough, but we're not gonna be talking about 32-inch wheels too often. But dare I say, just given the progression of 29-inch wheels and how it came about, I think we're starting to see history repeat. And I think, probably 5 years from now, we might be talking about how these things are replacing 29er wheels and they're the future. So one to watch, sort of just putting the flagpole out there. Let's move on to the next big news out of the industry, which is there's a company called ReTyre, a Norwegian tire company that's been making like they don't have too much in production. They've been more like a company that's been continually investing in its product and has had some big promises around bio-based elastomers, and the goal is to basically make a fully recyclable tire that can be turned back into a new tire. The idea is the technology they're using can produce tires that they're hoping are competitive with the existing tire methods, but recyclable and perhaps even a bit lighter than what is commonly available today. So their products today are seen on like Tool chariot trailers. They have goals of also being equipped on like more mass market bikes, kids bikes, sort of as they refine their processes. And then long term, I think their goal is to actually become like a full-blown, full-scale tire manufacturer across all industries. But for now, I think it's interesting because they've announced that they're hoping to set up a production facility within the USA to service the market there. And it's certainly moving forward at quite a rapid rate for this company. So, Josh, is this one you managed to see, or is it sort of tucked into the depths of Sea Otter?
I did not catch this one in person. It escaped me.
Okay. Yeah, so I think they were at Sea Otter, but I think really there for like more industry conversations rather than trying to show off their latest wares. But I think it's just an interesting one to watch. As many voices in the industry are starting to push the cycling industry to be less hypocritic and offer sustainable products that are better for the environment. I think something like this has some real legitimate place in the market, and there's real legitimate demand, assuming they can prove themselves to be a good functioning product. Anyway, I think it's one to watch, and apparently if you accidentally eat your tires, these are non-toxic.
It's a weird feature.
ReTyre is a company. It looks like they've got plans to just be at basically every cycling trade show and try to get as much interest as they can from, I guess, product managers and those that are likely to buy into the product. So, for industry members listening, then I'm keen to hear what you think of it, what stage this product is at, and I guess what it would take for this product to start being spec'd on more bikes. I think it's cool to see. Time for a bit of a new segment. This is normally where we would have like our PSA, or occasionally we'd have even a pick one, which we haven't had for a while. But I'm going to introduce a new segment, which is industry wish list. So basically this is we get a lot of industry people that listen to this podcast, and my wish is for a product that seemingly doesn't exist at the moment. So I got a friend with a Canyon Lux, a new Canyon Lux, and the headset keeps working its way loose. So the headset's an Across integrated headset, so you got the cables running through it, and it's kind of like a semi-regular top cap. So the idea is that the brake hoses aren't running through the stem, but rather just like through these ports into the top of the headset top cap and then into the frame. And researching this, there's actually like a remarkable lack of nice headsets that just have this sort of internal routing through the headset, but with like a fairly regular top cap that just has like holes in it that you can just route with normal stems and match with normal round steerer spaces. And I'd previously come across this, like I still have a Factor Lando hardtail, which unfortunately doesn't get a lot of use, but that as well has like, I also wanted this same style headset for that a couple of years ago, where I just wanted a regular internal headset with just some holes that I can choose how many, whether to plug them or not. And yeah, a nice high quality headset to go with that frame. But instead I'm using their sort of proprietary headset spaces that align to their own top cap. Yeah, anyway. Zach, am I talking crap? Does this thing exist?
I feel like this kind of halfway exists. Both Chris King and Wolftooth make internal routed headsets for the NV system.
Yes.
Which is on NV bikes and a lot of custom bikes.
So not round.
But like that, it's like halfway there, right? Like they just need a slightly different top cap, like machine it a little bit different.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Like the rest of it's all exactly how it should be. They just need to just machine it a bit different.
100%. So yeah, that's basically what I'm asking. I'm asking for like Wolftooth or Chris King or Cane Creek just to make your internal headset, but not force you into using like the in-route or other road integrated systems. Just give us an alternative top cap with like tunable plugs, ideally, so I can decide whether I need like 3 ports or 1 port. And then all the other headset assembly pieces should be the same.
Let me pick how many ports it has, because like when you see the one like Trek do this where they have like a bunch of different holes and you plug the ones you're not using, it just looks cheap.
Yeah, okay.
Like if I'm buying a Chris King level headset, I want to be able to pick how many holes it has.
Okay. So like you could pick 1 hole left, 1 hole right. Yeah. 2 holes left, 2 holes right.
It can't be that hard, but maybe it is.
Yeah, it makes a lot more parts, but I mean, in a dream scenario, that would be awesome as well.
So
but
don't offer it in 10 colors.
I'm just thinking I've got... Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I would be happy if it's just available in black, maybe silver to begin with. But yeah, there is currently the only company that I've come across that's making this product, and basically every manufacturer that's using these is... it's Acros, and they're just plastic junk. Not a top quality headset, and they're not well suited to like the rigors of mountain biking. And for me, like these headsets keep being the disappointing point of a lot of the bikes that have these sort of integrated cable routing. So my first wish is stop doing integrated cable routing on a mountain bike. But if you have a mountain bike with this feature, or you want a mountain bike with this feature, then I'd love to be able to get a great headset. And for me, Chris King's the benchmark with its grip lock compression system. Like that just for me just holds tighter than anything else, and that would be my first preference. But I would happily settle for like a Wolftooth or a Cane Creek as well. So please, industry, if you're listening, make me a nice headset that turns these bikes into better bikes. It's probably worth noting before we move on that just because I always get messages like this, there is a company called Easy Bike Parts that make a headset that is designed to convert these frames that I'm talking about into like slightly more traditional headset routing, cable routing. We spoke about this headset a little over a month ago on the podcast. I'm not interested in it. We covered it back then. I think it basically it forces a hard stop on the cable housing where it needs to move, and I think you'll trade one problem for another with this headset. So it's not what I want. Anyway, anything else to add on that one?
I just feel like in general, like the quality of headsets stocked on bikes these days are not good. It's like I feel like it's just a easy spot for companies to save money. So it's like a lot of plastic stuff, cheap bearings, just like in general, an overlooked part that is pretty important to the riding experience.
Yeah, important to the riding experience, and also when it fails, it screws up the fork steerer, and it often screws up can even screw up the bearing seats in the frame. Like it's a part that like you don't think about until it's damaged something. It's for me, I agree. Like it's hidden away, and it does feel like a place that a lot of manufacturers like to save cost on. I just wish they wouldn't, and I think that it's time that we get some better options here. Anyway, all right. Well, that was a fun rant / wish list. Before we get to some of the tech news for the week, Josh, you recently spent some time chatting with Lachlan Morton. What's the story there?
Yeah, so in a bit of news that also came out today, or I guess yesterday when we're listening to this podcast, Lachlan had, so I guess backtracking a little bit more, earlier this year, Lachlan had kind of released a race calendar of sorts that kind of indicated where he's going throughout the year. It's a kind of non-traditional schedule for a professional like gravel mountain bike racer. He's not doing the whole lifetime race series. He's just doing a couple of the races and then a variety of other international events along with those. He had the Unbound gravel race on his schedule, which he won that, the elite 200-mile race last year. But he decided to change that a little bit and go for the XL distance at this year's Unbound, which is 350-mile self-supported ultra endurance kind of epic version of Unbound. So that announcement was made today. I was able to get him on the phone a few days ago to talk about that a bit. So I think we've got a few clips from that interview that we're going to embed here in the podcast in a little bit. But we talked about Unbound, but we talked about a lot of other things, his kind of the evolution of his thoughts around gear in general, bike setups, how he approaches that, especially for this kind of very diverse calendar that he's got this year, where he's kind of bouncing around from gravel to mountain bike to endurance events, and how he trains for those, how he chooses his gear, lots of interesting things.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's listen to that clip from the interview.
Do you come up with a lot of your more like unusual air quotes setups yourself, or do you kind of have a mechanic that you say, I want this bike, but I want to be in this position. It's different from how I am now, like, lower handlebars or whatever it is. Like, how does that, what's that situation like for you these days?
No, it's definitely a lot of just experimenting at home. Like, my garage is just full of different parts and bits, and I'm always changing things, mainly out of interest, because it's kind of fascinating that you can like take one bike, make it ride so many different ways and feel different, and it can be like a very different experience. If you put like a riser bar on a cross-country bike versus like a super slam stem and narrow bars or whatever, that it can change the whole feeling of it. I just like to play with it in that way, and then I feel like the more extremes you play with, you really get a feel for like, okay, this race I'm going to need this kind of setup, and I think I want it in this way. Or on this specific bike, I need to run whatever, this 140 stem, or on this bike I need a 90 stem because I want it to feel this certain way. And now I have like a pretty good grasp on like what affects what, and then how that rides in different terrain, just through like hundreds of hours of playing around and shit, basically. So I would say that like ability to play with things and understand it is good, but to make it all mechanically functional and sound is definitely not my strong suit. So that's where I rely on Tom a lot. I'm like, I kind of want to replicate whatever I have going on here on this bike, like on the race bike, and then he'll sort of help me facilitate it in a way that like works a lot better. Or sometimes he'll like see something I've done and just kind of like be like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's dumb, which is also helpful. But yeah, it's mainly just me messing in the garage, and I'll play with like 3 or 4 different crank lengths in a week, and like really radical stuff with handlebars and tires and stuff. But that's like fun for me. It's not always extracting performance, I guess. Sometimes it ends up that way because you really cotton on to something. You're like, oh, this will be fast for a race, but it's just kind of born out of like a curiosity, I think, and too much time on my hands, maybe.
Yeah. So your Leadville bike, I think it probably would have been a couple of years ago now. How did that one come about? I think that was 23 last time you did that. The
hardtail, stem hardtail. I started playing around with it like adjustable stem, like the ones I use for bike fitting, because I wanted to play with just understand the relationship between like reach and stack a lot more, because they kind of like, when you go lower, majority of the time, like the reason the handling and everything's kind of compromised is because it's longer. So I was like, what if you could just bring it lower, which involved like it was like a 150 stem, I think, that was you could get to like basically vertical, like machined out a little bit, so you could really just have it like down. So basically you're just like taking the handlebar and like putting it halfway down the top tube, and as ridiculous as it looks, you realize you're like, oh wow, because the reach is kind of short still, it still handles well, you know, unless you're like really dropping into like steep stuff where you can't control like right where that weight is. Like it was actually didn't seem to like compromise the ability of like a cross-country bike, or at least a hardtail, very much. And then just that body position for a race like that felt a lot more efficient, and so I was just riding on that for a long time and then decided I'd use that for the race. So yeah, it was just like playing around with some cheap stems on Amazon at the extreme ends. That was an example of like starting at an extreme end, thinking like, oh, you'll probably come back halfway. But like sometimes if you change something so much, you understand like, okay, the handling's like way slower, or you're just like, there's way too much weight in the front wheel, or the opposite, right? And then you get a rangefinder. But that was like a weird example where I did it and I was like, oh, this feels good. It just looks extreme. I still think that was a really good fast setup. Wouldn't have changed much, except for I wouldn't run a hardtail there.
How do you balance your gear considerations between like your big endurance feat missions or like world tour racing or that kind of stuff? Do you use the same stuff across the board because you know it and you like it and it's durable, or like does everything change on a race by race basis?
I'd say everything changes. I think for endurance-based things, if it's self-supported, you're always erring on the side of like, I want something that's going to last. Also something that you've tested a lot and know really well. So, you know, it's like if I was going to go and ride like Divide or something, and I've been riding a specific tyre, but maybe there's a new model that you've only done like a couple of weeks on, is apparently faster, but you just don't have the experience. It's like I'm always going to go for the one that I've tried and tested a lot more, just so I know. Then like with like racing setups, it's a lot more optimizing for the race. So like trying to find the faster stuff. But even that is still like a trade-off and consideration, you know, because you have to also factor in like the way you ride versus like, you know, it's like if you look at like some of Keegan's setups and people will be like, oh, that must be the best, that's the fastest. And you're like, yeah, okay, for him. But like, if I try and follow him down power line on those tires, I'm going to eat shit, you know, like, because he's a faster mountain biker than I am. So like my trade-off is it's like I'm going to have to run something a bit more tread, but that's going to get me into this part of the race, you know, where otherwise maybe I wouldn't be there. So like, I'd say ultra stuff, it's definitely like tried and true, happy to give up speed and just know it's going to work, because the peace of mind and confidence is actually maybe ultimately worth more speed. Whereas, yeah, a race, it's like playing around a lot more specific.
All right. Well, yeah, if you found that interesting, then yeah, there's plenty more from that conversation that you can find on escapecollectors.com. You'll find the story and the full embed of that. Otherwise, yeah, just check out the everything feed if you're a member to Escape Collective in the podcast. You'll find it there. Otherwise, yeah, it's you'll find the interview in Spin Cycle as well, which is our sort of our everything racing podcast on Escape Collective. All right, well let's move on to some of the quick tech bites for the week. I always struggle to say that one. Let's cover it off. So before we get to some of the more interesting things out of Bespoked from the Manchester Bike Show, Hunt have released a new range of road racing wheels, the Aerodynamicist Carbon Disc range, and yeah, some key details of this one. There's 3 different wheel sets with different pricing options within each, but yeah, basically there's going to be a 3 key depths. So there's a 34 mil option, a 44 46mm option, and a 54-58mm option. All of them are available with like either carbon fiber spokes for weight savings or a bladed steel spoke for cost savings. They all appear to feature a 22mm internal width hooked rim, so yes, you can run them at whatever pressure you want with tubes without. The lowest system weight with like the shallowest wheel with carbon spokes, you're looking at 1,175 grams. So weights are getting way down there. Of course, Hunt have put these in the wind tunnel as they always do. There's white papers associated with that. Of course, they're claiming they're faster. Other details, they've moved the hubs to their 40-tooth ratchet system, which is kind of like a copy of DT Swiss's Star Ratchet, but it's not the same. It is a different system. They're not cross-compatible. That's a hub I've been testing in their gravel wheel as of late. They've also partnered with Enduro bearings, so they've moved from the previous bearing over to like a Enduro ABAC 5 bearing. So quite a bit going on with these wheels. But yeah, if you're interested, then check it out from Hunt. Hunt being a consumer direct company, typical sort of well-priced elements on these wheels. So yeah, one to look out for if you're in the market for new road racing wheels. All right, well let's chat about some of the things from Bespoked. Suvi was there, but only for half a day, so we've got one big gallery out of the event. But I think she got in there and then realized that she should have had accommodation and probably needed more time there. A bigger show than anticipated, but from that there's some pretty interesting stuff that's out of the show, and I'd encourage people to check out the gallery from Suvi. But some of the things that stood out to me, there's a few new products from Garbaruk, from KOM, and from a bike company called Antidote. So let's chat about a few of these. Garbaruk have been busy lately. So the previously Ukrainian aluminium manufacturing small parts company, they're now in Poland. They introduced wheels not that long ago, so like their own hubs with their own aluminium spokes, which was an unexpected release from the company. And now, even more unexpected, is they've got an electronic rear derailleur. Josh, did you see this thing?
I saw it in Suvi's coverage, and it looks very interesting. You know, it looks to me like, I'm trying to wrap my head around how they're going to make it work. So the description like that Suvi got out of them was like, it's going to be programmable to kind of map to a variety of cassettes, right? So I'm trying to figure out how they might do that. And then the parallelogram kind of looks like the Madrone system, right? Like that we've seen teased at a few events, and that one's not going to be electronic, right? It's their mechanical one, but the parallelogram looks kind of similar in how they've structured it. But obviously,
fully CNC machine.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have thoughts on how they might make this thing function?
Yeah, I mean, I think it to me, the electronics are very well in line with what we're seeing out of some of the Chinese derailleur manufacturers that are sort of claiming to offer very similar tunability, like via an app that you can kind of select the number of speeds and perhaps independently adjust the spacing from one gear to the next. I suspect they're probably landing on that, or perhaps even just like licensing or borrowing or buying those electronic components from a Chinese manufacturer. The battery looks very like SRAM Axis-esque, but from what I understand, it's not that battery. So it's a different battery again. I think it's interesting. I don't know. I think we're going to get to a point quickly, which we've kind of seen in the mechanical derailleur market, that there was like quite a number of bougie kind of boutique brands offering mechanical derailleurs, and in the end, most people just stick with SRAM and Shimano. I think we're gonna, in the next 2 years, I think we're going to get to that same point with electronic derailleurs, where there's like maybe a dozen different options of electronic derailleurs, and some are really fancy, some are really cool looking, but end of the day, most people will just stick with the mainstream options because they're the most reliable thing, and you can walk into any bike shop and get spares for them. But yeah, it's still cool.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing about Garbaruk is that they are, they do have kind of a complete ecosystem now. So yeah, I mean, finding spare parts it will be difficult, but it's kind of like Ingrid, I think Ingrid will remain, like, their derailleurs are adaptable, right? Like with like swapping, you can convert them for a lot of different cable pull ratios. You can convert the same derailleur to work across a variety of different shifters. It kind of sounds like maybe that's the way Garbaruk is going here. But then if you're, using their cassette, their shifter, their parts, ideally it'll work really well together, but it's just offering that kind of bespoked, very anodized, colorful, interesting looking component set.
Yeah. I think the main thing for this is, like, for it to be successful, I think it would need to be compatible with Shimano and SRAM shifters, or one or the other. And given the history of both of those companies are pretty, they tend to try close off their systems in that sense. So I know Garbaruk was also showing its own ring shifter, which worked with this derailleur, but I think, in order to be successful, I would think it needs to be truly compatible with existing shifters, as well as Garbaruk's own answer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know. Zach, do you ever see these, like, sort of boutique-y derailleurs coming into the shop?
Not really the derailleurs as a whole, but like seeing Garbaruk cages and stuff. I guess, like, to me, like, what's the sell? Like, why do I want this derailleur over a SRAM or a Shimano derailleur? Like, what's it doing differently?
It's colorful.
Besides being colorful. Like,
colors.
So you get colors and we're shifting. I'm sold.
Yeah. I mean, it does, like, I would normally argue and say, well, we haven't ridden it, we don't know that it's worth shifting, but it does look very light. It looks a little on the flimsier side.
Like, the cage looks the same as their aftermarket cages, which are, like, extremely flimsy. Don't seem to shift particularly well, even with their cassettes. Like, they run really quite loud. Like, they're cool colors, but, like, I just don't, like, besides the color, I don't know why I would go out of my way to purchase this product versus, like, I don't know, like a SRAM or Shimano. Like, I just don't see what this is doing better for me over even, like, a GX straight.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, I tested Garbaruk's crankset, their gravel crankset, last year, and the review of that is online that you can read, but it was beautiful. It really functioned nicely. I mean, it looks great. You can get it in all sorts of colors, but, like, far more limiting in terms of, like, length options than any of the mainstream brands. And like, there were elements that showed a little bit of, like, experience lacking, I guess. Like, the one thing like that basically led to me not loving the crankset was, like, the lock ring that held the chainring on. They'd made it too minimalist, and I cracked one. I heard of others cracking them. It was just, like, this very, very finicky thing that was hard to use, and then also was so light that it was easy to fail. So, and that you can't put any other lock ring on that crankset. So the whole crankset is brought down by this, like, 6 gram, few dollar part.
And, like, that's just a crank, right? Like, a 1x crank is a 1x crank. Like, it's not, as long as the crank doesn't fall apart on you, like, it's not going to necessarily affect the way the bike rides. But, like, if you have a derailleur or a cassette or something that is made of equal quality, like, that's going to affect the ride, right? Like, where a crank is kind of just, it's like a C-post. I guess not a dropper C-post, but, like, or a stem. It's just, like, there and doing its job. Like, that's kind of how I feel like a crank. Like, you can use any aftermarket crank with a 1x, and it's more or less going to be fine. But a derailleur and cassette and, like,
as long as you know it's being tested, it
just doesn't seem as worth it.
I don't know. It's I think it's an interesting category for Garbaruk to get into. It's unexpected. Like, I would consider it high on development costs and low on potential return for them, which makes it all the more interesting as to why they're doing it. But one to watch. I mean, the derailleur we've seen so far, I believe, is very much a prototype. So who knows how it'll change from here? But I'm sure we'll see this thing again.
Companies with a lot more money behind them have tried making their own electronic group sets and failed, and not selling them. Right? Like FSA or TRP or whomever. Like
FSA. Yeah. Yeah.
people have tried and
Well,
failed.
TRP one's not even out yet.
Yeah, right. Rotor. That was hydraulic, but still.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, one to watch. But also interesting was another prototype from KOM King of the Mountain, which they've been showing this hub recently, called the Xeno Infinity. And the idea of it's kind of this novel design, but basically that's a rear hub that puts the free hub mechanism, so the I guess the pole system, on the opposite side of the hub. And the idea is that you then get you remove like all the excessive loading that most hub designs currently have, where they put a lot of like all your drive forces are basically going through like the one bearing in the free hub body and maybe the bearing inside the drive side of the hub shell. But you're basically only loading up like half the bearings in a lot of hub designs. And KOM are basically their goal is to like spread that out and create better bearing alignment and basically spread all your drive forces throughout all the bearings in the hub. And they claim it's a more efficient system. Certainly their goal is to make it more reliable as well, like less bearing wear and all that. So it's interesting, but what they were showing at Bespoked was a prototype version of their prototype version, which is a Sprag clutch. So kind of moving into the like Onyx hubs with like that sort of infinite number of engagement points with what's basically like a one-way bearing system. So almost like a silent system that's has instant engagement. I think it's interesting.
It's very interesting, but requires a proprietary rotor, which I don't necessarily like that aspect of it. But
yes,
it's an interesting concept.
Worth mentioning, yes. I think that's definitely the very obvious downside to the design is that proprietary rotor, because there's like a whole system beneath the rotor and they need space there. So I think that will prove to be the point that people perhaps don't buy in. But one to watch as well. I mean, it's cool to see a hub that's so wildly different to everything else. Yeah, lucky last for this week was another one that was shown at Bespoked. It's a Polish company. They're sort of neighbors to Garbaruk, and this thing was covered in Garbaruk components. But Antidote, they've been a bit of a player in the mountain bike world, making very boutiquey gravity style mountain bikes, and they have entered the drop bar world with a gravel bike. So this thing is rather wild. I don't know how else you'd say it, but it's called the Path Seeker, and it's a full suspension gravel bike. Josh, how would you explain the full suspensionness of this bike?
That's a tricky one, Dave. As far as like, I'm still trying to figure out what to actually call these bikes. We saw this, the Lee Coogan, the Super Gravel at Sea Otter, with their rear damping system called the Innova structural suspension, in a flex stay to kind of get rear suspension on that drop bar bike. And then it was suspension corrected for like a standard, cross country fork. This Antidote is quite different from that. They've got their own front suspension going on, but I don't know what to call it. Maybe like a boutique drop bar mountain bike. They're high end, high end components, high end design. A lot's going into these bikes, but we're seeing a lot of them right now. And so, trying to wrap my head around them. And then I guess your question was more like what the suspension is, right? Like, like advanced damping systems rather than full on suspension, maybe.
Yeah. So I think that rear end is both front and rear are claiming 20 mil of travel. The front end is quite a simple one. It looks like an old Cannondale head shock, but it's actually from an Italian firm called Highride. And if that sounds familiar, it's because the BMC ERS LT has that exact system. Pinarello, I think, once upon a time did a bike with Highride as well. But it's basically like a little 20 millimeter, tiny little hydraulic shock with a lockout knob that sits in the center of the steerer. I didn't like it in the BMC. I found that it sort of it worked well enough on chattery gravel, but as soon as you got into like rough stuff, it would just like become this like mess of just topped out harshly and just didn't really inspire confidence. Like I actually much rather a rigid fork over it in my use case. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go with it here, but I think that rear end is pretty interesting. It's like super flexy chainstay matched with the seat stay. It goes into like this eccentric pivot point in the middle of the frame, in the middle of the seat tube, top tube, and seat stay junction. So like the top corner of that triangle, there's this big pivot point. Kind of looks a bit like an old, like, for those that have been around for a long time, like almost like a GTI drive in a way, but like in an unusual position. And that leads me to my one point, which is like, if you're into like classic styled bikes and you love like a modern bike, like the lines of a specialized Crux, or like anything that's from a custom builder with like smooth lines, Josh, would you say it's safe to say you'll hate this?
I think it would be pretty safe to say that. Yeah, lots of jagged lines with this one.
Yeah, so I think, Bianchi's original Arcade X, which we had previously voted on the podcast as the ugliest bike in the world, may have inspired this. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too harsh, but
if you're coming from a mountain bike background, though, I don't think you would hate this as much as a road biker would.
It would be a bad looking mountain bike, though.
Yeah.
Like, if those similar lines, it would not look nice.
Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting. Like, I don't want to disparage like the innovative take on this. Like, I think it is an interesting bike. I don't know if we'll get to ride one, but time will tell.
What do you think of this segment as a whole, though? While we're on this, like real quick, what do you think of this segment, Dave and Zach?
I kind of want to save this question because I actually have it written down for a future episode as a on your mind topic. But yeah, basically, I think it's the very short answer to that is I believe this segment now exists because cross-country bikes have become like trail bikes, and that there's this segment in the market that like needs backfilling.
I feel like some people just like refuse to ride mountain bikes. Like, I'm not a mountain biker. I don't ride mountain bikes.
Yeah. We had about 10 gravel bikes show up to our short track cross country race last night. So there's a lot of people out there like that for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the industry, like as cross country bikes got more capable and more exciting, and definitely better at handling technical terrain and allowing you to take them into much more technical and high consequence terrain, I think, and the hardtail is kind of left behind as a result of mountain biking progressing that way. I feel like gravel is now coming up from behind and filling that sort of old school mountain bike where you just like would ride fire trails and smooth trails. I think there's a gap being filled there. But yeah, perhaps one to talk about more in the future. Cool. All right. Well, that's the news from the week, and head to Escape Collective to see all the things that we discussed, plus more. But otherwise, I think it's time for Ask a Wrench. So for those on the free feed, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Tell a friend about it. Share the episode with as many people as you can. We're still keen to get more listeners. But if you'd like to hear Ask a Wrench, where we answer questions. This week we got questions related to what we think are the best inner tubes for road. And one related to Schwalbe's new Clik Valves and our thoughts there, and a little bit of an extra note for Campagnolo mechanical users. So we'll dive into that, and you need to be on the member feed of Escape Collective in order to listen to this. So if you're not already a member, please consider joining. It gives you access to everything that we do. It also supports independent journalism. EscapeCollective.com/join is where you'd head to become a member. Yeah, from there, it's just a few easy steps to get this podcast into your podcast player of choice. Otherwise, you can listen to the full versions of these episodes once you're logged in directly on our website on the podcast page.